We shall commence this module by discussing about the public goods in brief. Theory of public goods provides a rationale for the allocation function of public policy. Public goods exhibits the feature of non-excludability and non-rivalry. In the provision of public goods, private market fails to utilize resources in an efficient manner. Public goods are also closely associated with the free rider problem, in which people do not pay for the goods and many continue to access it, which in underproduction, overconsumption and degraded goods, and hence government intervention is required. The problem then is how the government should determine how much of such goods are to be produced and allocated. The difficulty lies in deciding the type and quality of a public good that should be supplied and how much a particular consumer should be asked to pay. In case of private goods, consumers pay for the benefits received, but the problem in case of public goods is how these benefits are valued. Individual consumers have no reason to reveal to the government how highly they value the public goods. To serve as an effective mechanism of preference revolution, voting process on tax and expenditure decisions could be taken. Voters are confronted with the choice among budget proposals which carry a price tag in terms of their own tax contribution. However, the political mechanism is imperfect and can only approximate what would be the optimal budget choice. To explain the preference revolution, there are two theories in public finance literature: the ability theory and the benefit theory, which was developed by Eric Lindahl. The benefit theory has a modern variety which is known as the voluntary exchange theory. Moreover, the module is about this theory in detail. After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the benefit theory or the voluntary exchange model, learn the two approaches of voluntary exchange model, that is Lindahl and Bowen's approach, identify the advantages and limitations of these approaches, analyze the feasibility of the two approaches. Now, we will move on to discuss the benefit theory or voluntary exchange theory. Most governments collect funds from various sources to provide public goods or to finance transfer payments. The supreme source of revenue in mixed economies is taxation. Under the voluntary exchange model, tax levels are determined automatically because taxpayers pay proportionately for the government benefits they receive. Putting it another way, the individuals who benefit the most from public goods pay the most taxes. For analyzing the voluntary exchange or benefit theory, two models have been discussed: the Lindahl model and the Bowen model. So, let us first discuss the module, that is Lindahl model. Eric Lindahl, from 21st November to 1891 till 6 January 1960, was a Swedish economist and a professor in economics at Uppsala University. He was also an advisor to the government of Sweden and the central bank. Lindahl modeled the question of financing public goods in harmony with individual benefits. The quantity of the public goods satisfies the requirement that the total marginal benefit equals the marginal cost of providing the public good. The necessary and sufficient conditions for such an equilibrium being, first, the sum of the declared willingness be greater than the cost of provision, and second is the minimum willingness to pay is positive and non-zero. Eric Lindahl was deeply influenced by his professor and mentor Knut Wicksell and proposed a method for financing public goods permissible to show that consensus politics is possible. As people are different in nature, their preferences are also different, and the consensus requires each individual to pay a somewhat different tax for every service or good that he consumes. If each individual's tax price is set equivalent to the marginal benefit received, then each individual is made better off by the provision of public good and thus may accordingly agree to have that service level provided. A Lindahl tax is a system of taxation in which individuals pay for the provision of a public good in accordance to their marginal benefits. So, each individual pays according to his or her marginal benefit derived from the public good. For example, if a loves scenic beauty and likes to be close to nature, he might be ready to pay $5 per day for sitting in a park, whereas a college student who does not visit the park very often will not be ready to pay so much, but might agree to pay $1. So, a person who values a good more pays more. In such cases, the problem of supply of the public goods at optimal level arises. Lindahl taxation is a solution for this problem. Lindahl tries to solve the following three problems: extent of state activity, allocation of the total expenditure among various goods and services, allocation of tax burden. Now, given the figure of supply and demand for state services or public goods, in the Lindahl model, if SS is the supply curve of public good, it is assumed that production function of public or social good is linear and homogeneous. DDA is the demand curve of taxpayer A and DDB is the demand curve for taxpayer B. The vertical summation of the two demand schedules or the vertical summation of the two demand curves of both the consumers of both the taxpayers results in community's total demand schedule for the public goods. A and B pay different proportions of the cost of the services. When Qn is the amount of public goods produced, A contributes Ne and B contributes Nf. The cost of supply is Ng. Since the state is non-profit, it increases its supply to Qm. At this level, A contributes Mj and B contributes Mr, that is the total cost of supply. Equilibrium is reached at point P on a voluntary exchange basis. Lindahl equilibrium. Lindahl taxes are also known as benefit taxes. Lindahl equilibrium is a sort of economic equilibrium under such a tax. It is a method of finding the optimum level for the supply of public goods or services. The Lindahl equilibrium happens when the total per unit price paid by each individual equals the total per unit cost of the public good. Lindahl equilibrium shows how efficiency can be sustained in an economy with personalized prices. Johnson, 1963, gave the complete interpretation of the concept of Lindahl equilibrium. The simple assumption of this concept is that every household's consumption decision is based on the share of the cost they must provide for the supply of the particular public good. The importance of Lindahl equilibrium is that it fulfills the Samuelson's rule and therefore said to be Pareto efficient, despite the existence of public goods. It also establishes how efficiency can be reached in an economy with the public goods by the use of personalized prices. The personalized prices equals the individual estimate for a public good to the cost of the public good. Lindahl pricing and taxation requires the knowledge of demand functions for each individual for all private and public goods. When information about marginal benefit is available only from the individuals themselves, they tend to underreport their valuation for a particular good. This gives rise to a preference revolution problem. Each individual can lower his tax cost by underreporting his benefits derived from the public good or services. This informational problem shows that survey-based Lindahl taxation is not incentive compatible. Incentives to understate or underreport one's true benefits under Lindahl taxation resemble those of a prisoner's dilemma, and people will be inclined to underreport their demands for the public goods or services. Let us now understand the Lindahl tax and Pareto optimality. A very important question is that whether a Lindahl tax is Pareto optimal equilibrium. A Pareto optimal allocation happens with public goods when the total of the marginal rates of substitution equals the marginal rate of transformation. So, if it can be shown that this holds true in Lindahl equilibrium, it can be conveniently said that it is Pareto optimal as well. This can be shown by figure. We take a demand curve for a public good. X will want more good to consume when the price of the public good is less. Let the horizontal line, that is the dashed line, be the full price of the public good. Now, here the demand curve implies that X will demand very less. But what if instead of the price decreasing, the percentage of the price X has to pay decreases? Now X sees the price going down, so his demand for the good increases. Now let's consider the demand curve of another person. Let's say Y sees the vertical axis turn the way around with the full price on the bottom and percentage decreasing as you move upwards. Like X, Y will also demand more as his observed price goes down. Now, as Y observes the price going down, it also means that we move further up the vertical axis. Equilibrium is when both X and Y demands the equal amount of the good. This is possible only when the demand curves of both X and Y intersects each other. If a line is drawn over the price axis, from that point of intersection, we get the percentage share for each person that is required to get that price. In the Lindahl tax scheme, it is essential that the system should provide for a Pareto optimal output of the public good. The other important condition is that the Lindahl tax scheme should connect the tax paid by an individual to the benefits he derives. This system promotes justice. If the individual's tax payment is equivalent to the benefit received by him, and if this linkage is good enough, then it leads to Pareto optimality. Consider figure. So, it is observed that X is paying P into 45% per unit and Y is paying P into 55% per unit, and the economy produces at Q star units. This point is called the Lindahl equilibrium and the corresponding prices are called Lindahl prices. Let us now look into the mathematical representation of the same. We assume that there are two goods in an economy. The first one is a public good and the second one is everything else. The price of the public good can be assumed to be P public and the price of everything else can be assumed to be P else. So that alpha into P public divided by P else is equals to MRS of the person. This is just usual price ratio or marginal rate of substitution that deals. The only change is that we multiply P public by alpha to allow for price adjustment to the public good. Similarly, person 2 will choose his bundle such that 1 minus alpha into P public divided by P else is equals to MRS of person 2. Now, we have both individuals utility maximizing. Moreover, in a competitive equilibrium, the marginal cost ratio, that is the price ratio, should be equals to the marginal rate of transformation, that is marginal cost of public good, that is MC public divided by MC else is equals to P public divided by P else is equals to MRT, which represents marginal rate of transformation. There are certain limitations of Lindahl's model. Let us now study them. Lindahl prices do face some serious drawbacks. First, individual demand curves and thus individual preferences are not easily known. Due to the free rider problem, people have the incentive to hide their true preferences and thus their marginal valuation. However, mechanism design of groves, which is strongly individually incentive compatible, and Vickray auctions could be used to overcome this problem. Another drawback is that Lindahl prices may be unfair. Consider a television broadcast antenna that is discretionary placed in an area. Those living near the antenna will receive a clear signal, while those living farther away will not receive the clear signal. Those living close to the antenna will have a relatively low marginal value for additional wattage, thus paying a lower Lindahl prices compared to the living further away, thus paying a higher Lindahl price. Now, we will move on to discuss the Bowen's model. Bowen's model has more functioning significance since it establishes that when the public or social goods are produced under conditions of increasing cost, the opportunity cost of the private goods is foregone. Consider figure. For example, if there is one public good and two taxpayers are there known as A and B, then the demand for public good is represented by A and B. Therefore, A plus B is the total demand for the public good. The supply curve is shown by A dash plus B dash, indicating that the goods are produced under the conditions of increasing cost. The production cost of public goods is the value of foregone private goods. This means that A plus B is also the demand curve of the private goods. The intersection of the cost and demand curves at B determines how a given national income should, according to taxpayers' desires, be divided between the social and the private goods. Hence, there should be OE public goods and EX private goods. Simultaneously, the tax shares of A and B are determined by their individual demand schedules. The total tax requirement is the area ABEO, out of which A is willing to pay GCEO and B is willing to pay FDEO. Let us now discuss the advantages and limitations of Bowen model. Advantages. The advantage of the Bowen model, that is also known as voluntary exchange model, is that it takes into consideration the direct correlation between revenue and expenditure in a budget. It explains the role of market in the allocation procedure of the public sector. Limitations. Although simple in its application, the model has the various difficulties. It limits the scope of government activities. Government can neither upkeep the poor nor take steps to stabilize the economy. It is applicable only when beneficiaries can be observed directly, which is impossible for most public goods. Taxation in accordance with the benefit principle would leave the distribution of real incomes unchanged. Let us now discuss the application of benefit principle. The benefit principle may be applied as a guide to tax structure design in the following ways. First, a general benefit tax. Under the benefit taxation, each taxpayer would be taxed in line with his or her demand for public goods. Since preferences differ, no general tax formula could be applied to all the people. Government can ask how much various consumers are willing to pay for the same amount. Suppose that taxpayers have the same structure of taste so that persons with the same income value same amount equally. Then people with income of rupees 10,000 value a given level of public goods at suppose rupees 1,000. With 1,000 units supplied, they would be willing to pay rupees 1 per unit. With incomes rupees 20,000, they would be willing to pay a higher price, let us say rupees 2. The appropriate tax formula then depends on the income and price elasticity of demand for public goods. If income elasticity is high, the appropriate tax prices will rise rapidly with the income. But if the price elasticity is high, the increase will be dampened. Second is specific benefit tax. In this case, particular services are provided on a benefit basis and consumers are asked to pay less user charges or tolls. Third, taxes in lieu of charges. At times when impositions of direct charges are costly, a tax on complementary products may be used in lieu of charges. For instance, automobile taxes may be used in lieu of tolls. Next is earmarking. It means allocating revenue collected from taxes. The ability to pay approach treats the government revenue and expenditure separately. Taxes are based on taxpayers' ability to pay and there is no quid pro quo. Taxes paid by the taxpayers are seen as a sacrifice, which raises the issues of how much the sacrifice of each taxpayer ought to be and how it should be measured. Equal sacrifice. The total loss of utility, because taxation ought to be equal for all taxpayers, the rich will be taxed more heavily than poor. Equal proportional sacrifice. The proportional loss of utility, because taxation ought to be equal for all taxpayers. Equal marginal sacrifice. The instantaneous loss of utility as measured by the derivative of the utility function, because taxation should be equal for all taxpayers. This will involve the least aggregate sacrifice, that is, the total sacrifice will be least. Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. Economists have displayed a growing interest in the problem identified to an appropriate allocation of public goods. The fact that public budgets has grown considerably during the period has added to the attractiveness of the problem. Individuals in a society have different preferences based on their nature, personal choices, etc. An individual's willingness to pay for a public good is a function of many factors like income preferences, etc. So, in such cases, the problem of supply of public good at optimal level arises. Lindahl taxation is a solution for this problem. Lindahl voluntary exchange model has proposed a solution to the problem of simultaneous determination of the extent of public activity and distribution of the corresponding tax burden. Lindahl tax is an individual share of the collective tax burden of an economy. The optimal level of a public good is that quantity at which the willingness to pay for one more unit of the good taken in entirely for all the individuals is equal to the marginal cost of supplying that good. Lindahl tax is the optimum quantity times the willingness to pay for one more unit of that good at this quantity. In spite of the shortcomings of Lindahl model, it has proven to be an important impetus for the development of the theory of public goods. The ability approach gives government revenue and expenditures separately. Taxes are created on taxpayers' ability to pay. There is no quid pro quo. It is measured by equal sacrifice, equal proportional sacrifice and equal marginal sacrifice.